Now I know what most of you are probably thinking. M82, are you insane? Airplanes are not efficient vehicles. Airliners and jets and whatever else constantly spew pollutants into our atmosphere. The Prius, now that's an efficient car. How do you ever plan on beating a Prius with something that flies 3 times faster than a Prius drives and gets you there even faster? That's just crazy talk. But I want you guys to think about it for a moment. A Prius, or any gasoline car, requires a lot of gas to move, to idle, to drive, to even exist. Hybrid cars supplement this a little bit since it doesn't use any gasoline on idle and can employ other regenerative technologies such as regenerative braking, solar panels, as well as efficient and stored energy transfer from combustion in general. Ultimately, these technologies don't even come close to comparing to a simple glider. The glider, using nothing but air currents, can soar across high altitudes, sprawling landscapes, up mountain ridges, and through steep thermal updrafts. But there are 2 main drawbacks to gliders. Firstly, they need another aircraft to get them off the ground, wasting valuable fuel and polluting the air. Secondly, that's boring. Could you imagine if I just said, "Duh, guys, just use a glider," and then ended the video there? That'd just be stupid. My point is, planes can absolutely become more efficient than a Prius under the right design conditions. And this isn't even mentioning the future of electric aircraft or anything like that. So in order to make this a true challenge, we don't just have to make the plane as efficient as a Prius. We also have to make it as utilitarian as a Prius. We need to carry 4 people and luggage across a long distance, possibly further than a real Prius could ever travel. Not only that, but we'll also be including luxury features to make the operation of this aircraft as easy as possible and as entertaining for the passengers as humanly possible. To determine the true challenge we're up against, first, we need to know a little bit more about the Prius. The Prius is a 4-door hatchback that is renowned for its fuel efficiency and economical accommodations. While the vehicle isn't necessarily sporty or fashionable, the price points and efficiency of the vehicle are nearly unrivaled worldwide. While it isn't the prettiest vehicle, the modern Prius line has come a long way since its inception and is slowly finding its place among the car community. Obtaining about 50 miles per gallon through general travels, the Prius remains an incredibly efficient vehicle through use of modern hybrid technology, allowing the engine to only be operated if it needs to be. Lastly, the 5 seats of the Prius, as well as sufficient trunk space, means that the Prius can comfortably seat 4 people as well as some luggage. All of these objectives will have to transfer into the vehicle, as well as a few more. Lastly, a somewhat comfortable interior should be used in this vehicle. This is in order to make long-distance flights more bearable for the operator as well as the passengers. Cup holders, heated seats, infotainment systems, speaker systems, and other luxury accommodations will be featured on board this aircraft to give the pilots and the passengers the most luxurious experience possible while coasting through the clouds. Next, this aircraft will need to fly directly. The aircraft will fly under its own power and straight to the destination. None of that ridge lift or thermal riding nonsense you'd see in a glider aircraft. In order to ensure this, our aircraft will be traveling at a minimum of 90 miles per hour as a cruising speed. Ultimately, our goal is not only to get you there more efficiently than a Prius, but faster than a Prius too. A cruise speed such as the one detailed above should guarantee the airplane should arrive in about half the time of a Prius. Of course, such a heavy plane will certainly have a difficult time reaching these requirements, as it is a pretty tall order for an aircraft. We'd most certainly have to make some radical design choices in order to get a plane like this to work. In order to design this aircraft, of course we'd be using Flyout. Flyout is an early access plane building game that allows us to accurately simulate such a vehicle, so naturally it will be used to build this aircraft. Well, that and the fact that my channel is kinda based around the game entirely. With that out of the way, I set to work. One of the most important things about building the fuselage of this aircraft is weight, especially if we aim to make it efficient. Because of this, the skin thickness will be as low as possible. We will be making the skin thickness of the aircraft about 2 mm, which is slightly thicker than the skin of a Cessna 172 for example, and sits at a common range of most private aircraft. Here you can also see that we made the fuselage extra wide to accommodate all 4 people, and eventually the tail closes into a very thin area. This fuselage would be ultralight, initially only weighing in at about 300 kilograms. Like seriously, a small team of dudes could pretty easily lift this fuselage. Of course, this doesn't include the fuel, the passengers, the interior, the wings, or the gear, engines, mounting points, anything like that. Obviously, this plane was going to get a lot heavier than a simple 300 kilograms. Now, in order to make a lifting surface on an aircraft efficient, the best way to do this is through a higher aspect ratio on the wings. Ignoring airfoil shape, the increase in camber and low surface area allow for more lift to be generated. The downside of this is that you stall pretty quickly under AOA, but as this wasn't a plane designed for high flight performance under alpha or stall conditions, this wasn't exactly a problem. So these wings would be extremely high in aspect ratio. This would normally be a problem structurally, but I will be designing a lift-inducing wing strut in order to solve this. Such a system can be seen on the Boeing truss brace winged concept and is used for the same reason, efficiency while maintaining structural enhancement. A slight positive dihedral is also introduced to the wing for the purpose of stability. Ideally, the wingtips may have fins in order to move the wingtip vortex and reduce drag, but I would be trying to keep this design simple for the sake of economy. The tail of this aircraft would also be a T-tail in order to avoid any downwash from the blades coming over the wings. This would increase control characteristics and make the plane generally more pleasant to fly. We would also be introducing two air-cooled engines to this aircraft. Initially, these engines were going to be an inline 3-cylinder piston engine, but eventually we settled for two 1.8-liter turbocharged 4-cylinders. While the turbocharger didn't necessarily increase efficiency, it would increase power, and most importantly, it would increase high-altitude performance. This would allow us to go faster and soar to higher altitudes. The propellers would be a 3-blade with a relatively low chord and propeller pitch, since the aircraft was designed to fly at low speeds, most likely never exceeding Mach 0.2 or maybe 140 miles an hour. After putting in the landing gear, electrical system, and doing some other things with the design of the aircraft, it was time to complete the interior. I gave the pilot a basic 6-pack, RPM gauges for the engines, and a radio. The co-pilot got a fun, luxurious infotainment screen, as well as an attitude and airspeed gauge for co-pilot control. Of course, as mentioned, this aircraft would be luxurious too. In my mind, I was hoping it would be as luxurious as maybe a Land Rover or some other car like that. Featuring a sound system, infotainment, and luxury heating and cooling, you'd be able to cruise in style. The back seats would also be getting screens, so maybe you could even watch a movie on your flight. Of course, all of this added substantial weight, although I reduced it wherever I could. The final weight of this aircraft, including 4 people, extra luggage, and all these comfort features, was about 1.6 tons. Add some fuel, and it'd get a little bit heavier. Admittedly, there was a lot inside this aircraft, but even then it was pretty heavy. Compared to a similar class of aircraft with 4 people inside of it, it was still about 1.2 to 1.3 times heavier. In order to get this thing as efficient as a Prius, those wings would need to generate a lot of efficient lift. After completing some testing, luckily enough, the aircraft was found to have a lift-drag ratio of about 21 when flying at cruising speed. Compare this to the 10 to 15 of an aircraft of a similar class, it was clear that the design was pretty aerodynamically efficient. The rest of this thing's efficiency would be carried by the engines and propellers. Designed with efficiency and power in mind, these engines would not disappoint. And with that out of the way, it was time to fly. And here was the aircraft we made. Later renamed the Albatross, it flew pretty well all things considered. It was decently quick, climbed well, and made its traveling very efficient. We were trying to answer one very serious question with it, however. Was it more efficient than a Prius? Well, to test this, we spawned the aircraft at cruising altitude with the same amount of fuel as you'd put into a Prius, about 10 gallons. At this altitude, the aircraft would cruise at about 91 miles an hour and could sustain this for about 4.3 hours. In order to figure out fuel economy, we would need to multiply these values. In its 4.3 hours of flight time, the aircraft would cover about 391 miles. Seeing as it has 10 gallons of fuel on board, this would equate to about 39.1 miles per gallon. That's incredible. My car doesn't even get that when I am trying to hypermile on the highway. But was it more efficient than a Prius? In order to figure this out, the question wasn't just about mere MPG. We also had to keep in mind the indirectness of traveling in a car and traffic. For the sake of giving the Prius the best chance we can, we won't be worrying about the possibility of traffic and constant acceleration/braking. We will be using its pure highway MPG value, 53 miles per gallon. So I mapped out a quote-unquote race on maps, from North Point, Florida to New Orleans, Louisiana. This would take substantially longer in the Prius since they had to go around the body of water and follow roads, whereas the plane could fly directly there. Using a map tool, the distances for this race could be figured out with fair ease. For the aircraft, it would have to fly 516 miles. The Prius, on the other hand, would need to travel up through Florida and then to the west. The detour would make the journey a minimum of 708 miles for the Prius. By dividing 708 by 516, we can figure out a quick efficiency ratio for the journey and apply it to the aircraft. The journey is roughly 1.372 times shorter for the aircraft, giving us the ratio of 1.372 to 1. By dividing the Prius's 53 mpg by this ratio, we will figure out the applied Prius efficiency for this journey. Since of course the Prius cannot travel as the crow flies, the mpg is reduced to 38.6 miles per gallon for this journey. Comparing this ratio, this puts our aircraft at just about a half a mile per gallon above the Prius. For the sake of practicality, it's important to note that the Prius would take about 15 hours to travel this distance, whereas the aircraft could complete it in under 6 hours. In luxury, speed, and efficiency, we had overcome the Prius in every way. Now we're talking! 3 times faster and more efficient than a Prius. It seems that the plane has won this time. Of course, to those of you watching, take these numbers with a grain of salt. There are certainly more fair journeys for the Prius, and there are certainly more efficient planes out there. This video is for one point alone. Just because it flies doesn't mean it can't be efficient. With the existence of gliders and the coming of new technologies such as electric aircraft, this could even become more efficient in the future. Who knows what the future holds for us? Of course, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.